our speaker today. So thank you, Anne.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. I first met Janet through the Quorum initiative, and I'm very pleased to say that we have since that time become friends. And Janet is a friend for whom I have great personal and professional admiration, and you will soon see why when I introduce her background. I think it's true to say that Janet is a bit of a phenomenon. She doesn't know what I'm going to say about her, I should say. This has not been shared with her first. She is a bit of a phenomenon. She's a specialist in finance and technology and has been highly successful in one of the most arcane and competitive and male-dominated businesses in the world. Janet started with the big-name financial institutions, ABN AMRO, Citi, Bank of America. She founded her own foreign exchange company, Touch FX, and she recently spent a year in Mumbai as head of risk, treasury and capital markets at Intellect Design Arena, which is a financial technology firm for the banking, insurance and financial services industries. She is currently managing director of Infinity Capital Partners, which is an independent corporate finance firm advising on financial risk and financial technology. On her way through this career, Janet gained an MBA from City of London-based business school CAS and was president of Women in Banking and Finance in 2017. As well as her considerable personal success in business, Janet has made a really big contribution on wider industry issues, and we'll be touching on this during the talk today. In summary, Janet is innately entrepreneurial, as well as being very clever, innovative, and from what I've observed, apparently quite fearless. What I'm going to do now is ask Janet a series of questions about different areas of her career and her observations, and then we will throw open the meeting to questions, and Diane will gather questions as we go through so that the second half of the meeting is thrown open to people on the board. Janet, if we could start with your year in Mumbai recently, how this built on your previous experience and what you learned from this very bold move.
Thank you, Anne. The first thing I'll start off by saying is that I'm a huge fan of Quorum, and I love this family, and thank you for having me this afternoon to talk about my experience and my sometimes, I think, tough career, but very, very rewarding. I was sharing with Anne and Meg recently my experience in India. Actually, just before I left, Meg asked me to give a presentation at one of her events, and I wouldn't disclose what my next move was going to be. And then I think she got an email to say, hey, Megs, I'm in India. I think in 2018, at that point, I had been running my own company, Touch FX, which was the first company of its kind, which was designed to bring complete transparency to the FX market for huge purchasers of foreign exchange. You have companies that buy billions of dollars or several hundred millions of dollars of currency every single day. And the market, because it's what we call over-the-counter market, it's not, you don't have an exchange, you just have buyers buying from each other. The transparency around the price that you pay for your foreign exchange is very opaque. So I was running a business at Citigroup where I was dealing with $1 trillion on a daily basis of foreign exchange currency. So I felt that after doing that, I'd like to offer a service back to the market, just for even regulatory reasons. So I've been running my company since 2014. And then in 2018, a friend of mine reached out to me and said, look, there's a company in India who's very interested in partnering with you and your innovation. But they would like you to come to India because there's huge opportunity to roll out your product across the eastern part of the globe, not just India, but Singapore, Hong Kong, Indonesia, and so on. And so I was happy just to have the interview via Zoom. So I didn't travel to India. I had my interviews. I had 3 interviews. The last one was with the chairman, who was very charming, via Zoom. And then after about 2.5 months, I think, I accepted the job. I'd never been to India before. And I didn't think it was necessary for me to make a trip there in between either to see whether I liked it or not. I just thought, I'll just go. So my 2 daughters, I have 2 wonderful girls who accompanied me to the airport, and they were just petrified. They just thought, Mum, why? You know, we thought you'd given up the traveling. And I said, no, it's going to be a great opportunity. I'm going to love it. And, you know, I did. It's like one of the best things I've done in my life. So I turn up at Mumbai. I'm CEO of a unit with 600 people. The business is global. It's not just going east. Although I didn't incorporate my software into the business that I took over, I did have a phenomenal time. They were struggling a bit at the unit I took over because they didn't really have deep expertise in capital markets. So it was a real opportunity for me to basically depart or impart 20 years of knowledge of capital markets to 600 people, which was just an absolute privilege and joy. You know, it's not something that you get to do when you work in a bank like Citigroup or Bank of America, but you go to a market like India where they are tech savvy and very hungry for knowledge. It was an absolute joy. So I did that. I found myself doing a lot of business on the eastern side of the globe. And I have to say, I was just really stunned by how advanced the technology is in countries like Philippines, Thailand. I mean, Singapore was amazing, absolutely amazing. They have a very, very advanced tech hub and sandbox. I didn't make it to China, but whilst I was in Hong Kong, they were floating with the idea of having a digital currency to run alongside renminbi. So it was a huge time. So what I would say about going to India was that when I got there, the one thing I learned about myself when I got there was I had to listen very, very carefully and keep a very, very open mind as to the people I was going to meet. And because I went there with almost a blank mind, I had no preconceived ideas. I stopped myself from having any preconceived ideas, which was quite difficult, but I really made the effort of saying, if anyone walks through my door, I have to have a complete blank mind and take them on face value. And for that reason, I just felt it was a very positive experience and created a lot of friendships. The other thing that I found quite remarkable was that as I traveled around the globe with my team, concluding on deals, what took me by surprise was the fact that people really wanted to hear what I had to say. Now, I know I can talk for England, but they were really interested in my capital markets knowledge, my knowledge of the financial ecosystem. And that was just incredible. So I'd get the most prestigious invitations. I remember when the Reserve Bank of India asked me to come back like every week to talk to their people. So I made really good friends with the governor and his team at the Reserve Bank of India. So what I would say is this, in a nutshell. Opportunities do not come gift wrapped, okay? And whilst all experiences and risks don't always work out, sometimes you just have to take that leap and try and embrace the change. And I think that when individuals see that you're enjoying being in their company and you're enjoying the challenge, they also go with you on your journey. And that was very much my experience in India.
Thank you, Janet. That's absolutely fascinating. And if I could ask you a bit about the actual work you were doing there in technology and finance, and what your observations were between, for example, the approach in the East compared to the approach in the West, which you've been principally used to, and indeed any predictions that you might have from your experience there about financial markets.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've got loads to say on that, but I'll keep it short. So I think that in terms of things that they do differently between the West, us in UK and Europe, and also I include the US in that comparison with the East. The first thing is that they're very, very tech savvy. So all the things that we have here at the moment in retail banking, such as the apps and alerts when we spend, they've gone way beyond that. So what they tend to have is the ability to just log on to like a WhatsApp or WeChat, one good example, but there's many different forms of that. And they're able to shop like we do with Amazon, and also chat to each other and share pictures or receipts of what they've just bought, so that they've bought the whole ecosystem of e-commerce, like your Amazon with your WhatsApp. And that's just normal. No one would ever consider shopping and doing things separately. So that's the first thing. And the other thing as well is that because particularly in like Singapore and China and Hong Kong and so on, their systems are like that. It's inconceivable for them not to use WhatsApp and those applications every day. The other thing that surprised me when I went to India, and I was really taken aback by this, was when the chairman said to me that the official form of communication in India was WhatsApp. I actually thought he was joking. That is not a joke. The Prime Minister, down to everyone in the 1.3 billion people in India, talk to each other on WhatsApp. Forget the emails. If you send an email, you will not get a response. So that was absolutely amazing. In terms of what comes next and how the world differs, I don't know if you remember recently that Facebook actually announced they were going to launch a currency called Libra. And it really scared central bankers around the world. And the reason being, because if you give up your sovereign currency, you actually, by default, allow a company like Facebook to actually have control of your currency. So what Facebook were basically saying was that we've got this currency, nobody needs to worry about having pounds or dollars anymore. You can use the Facebook currency and we're giving marketplace and you can do it exactly what you like. And what that would have meant for particularly African countries is that people would have just not used currencies in those markets and used Libra's digital currency. So what that did, it actually set the cats amongst the pigeons. But what I discovered in the East, and I think it's now common knowledge, was that China and in Hong Kong was actually working away on having a digital currency, and they were testing it at the time. And now it's in circulation. So the renminbi, which is the equivalent of our sterling, I can see in the very near future that being a secondary currency or just used when you need cash. But those economies are heavily digitized, and they've digitized, or they're on their way to digitizing their currency. Now that has huge implications for any banking system, particularly with regards to liquidity. But I mean, our worlds are going to change when we do that, absolutely change. Some for the positive and some for the negative, but on balance, I think it'll make life easier for us.
Do
So
you
those
see that happening within the next step? What sort of time scale do you think that might happen on? Is it a long time ahead? Or?
Well,
5 years?
well, I think for the UK, the Bank of England, for those of you who haven't seen it, they actually published a white paper on digitising sterling in March. And that's actually online, available for all to read. And they, in the paper, which I think is very well written, they highlight the major challenges that they face. And one of the key things that they're worried about is displacing our retail banks, and having liquidity move from the retail banks, maybe too much to the Bank of England if they have a digitized currency, because it does reduce costs, and our banks operate making a margin on the transactions between merchants, us and themselves. And so the Bank of England highlights those concerns, but it's really worth reading to really understand what the world could look like going forward. So in terms of your question, Anne, about when is that likely to happen, I don't actually think we have any choice about having a digital sovereign currency. I do think it will be within the next 5 years. I'm not sure. I actually think that with what's going on between China, UK, and the US, I'm just wondering what China's next move is going to be. And I think when you make it easy to affect commerce around the world, I think you begin to see very interesting things. So my thoughts are that the Chinese will absolutely go, will progress their plans in digitizing their currency, making it easier for countries around the globe to do business with them. That will upset the US for sure. And it remains to be seen what role Britain will play between those two giants. So I think they will do something, but we have to wait and see.
Goodness, I mean, this is huge news and absolutely enthralling. I think if I was interviewing you for lunch with the Financial Times column, that's just given us our headline. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I'm sure there will be questions about that later, but I just want to press on to two big issues which are being much discussed at the moment, quite understandably. And I'd like to get your insights onto these issues. The first one I'd like to talk about is the Black Lives Matter movement. From your own experience, what would your diagnosis be for what businesses need to do to address this?
Yeah, I'm really glad that we've touched on this question there, because since the unfortunate death of George Floyd, and many friends, professional friends, have reached out to me from around the globe, seeking advice about some. My Black British friends have contacted me to say, well, look, the dynamics between the race issue in the UK is very different to that in the US. And just to give a little history here, in the UK, most Black people would have come over predominantly during the era of Windrush, where the British government ran a campaign to recruit migrants into the UK during the 50s and the 60s. Whereas in the US, it's very much part of the slave trade, while you have African Americans. And there's been a 400-year duration of campaigning for equality and better rights across the board, whether it be employment or healthcare. So the dynamics between the two groups, I think, are very different. But what we both feel is that there's a lack of equality with regards to access to equality in the workplace, access to healthcare, and so on. So what I felt was that what corporations should have done, I felt that a lot of corporations like Nike, some of the banks and what have you, they put out statements to say, we're absolutely going to help or we're going to commit money to the Black community. And some people ask me, like, you know, how should that be worded? So I kind of said to people, my colleagues, it's good that they want to do something, but in all honesty, I think that it will be seen with a heavy dose of skepticism. Because really what I think companies should have been able to do, and I think it's quite unfortunate that they were not able to do this, is to say we have been working really hard over the last X years or decades, striving to have equality for our Black employees, and here are the metrics. Okay, we haven't done a great job always, but the trajectory has been upwards, and we can show that. To date, I'm not aware, I personally am not aware of any groups that have done that. So my advice to my colleagues are that if your firms are going to make statements, they have to live and die by them. So if you're making a statement that you're going to support the African American community or the Black British community, please don't let it be a statement of appeasement. Mean it. Say what you are going to do, and make it clear that you will live by those promises and commitments. And so what you'll see is a mixed bag of different kind of messages. Some will have money tied to them. Others will say, look, we're looking internally, we're looking to improve the representation of Black staff within our firms. I hope they do that. Most companies haven't. Particularly in the finance industry, it's just been poor progress. But I think now they have an opportunity to really look internally and try and understand what is the experience of your Black employees. Why is it that they don't progress up the corporate ladder as fast or as well as maybe the other groups that are in BAME, like Indians or Latin Americans? I mean, there has to be some deeper dive to really understand the dynamics and experience of individuals. The other thing that I also have been raising quite a lot recently is, you know, I like the big headhunters, don't get me wrong. I think they do a fabulous job, but they really don't know Black candidates very well. The specialist recruitment firms have a much deeper relationship with executive Black candidates and can speak very well to the capabilities of those individuals. And firms need to make a bigger effort to reach out to those firms and get to know them so that they can speak to the candidates that those firms have on their books. So those are the two main things that I have raised and very passionate about with regards to having conversations with my colleagues.
Yes, thank you for that. I think your point about putting out statements and about the statements of appeasement was a very striking way of putting it. I know a lot of people in communications who were rather uncomfortably trying to draft just those sorts of statements to say something, but very often had nothing much to back it up but good intentions and very little in terms of progress to point to. I think your point about living it, taking action, getting to know the potential talent better is very well made. The second big issue I wanted to ask for your insight on is on gender pay equality. Now, I know you were part of the working group that was set up by our previous Prime Minister in the UK, Theresa May, of course female. And I wonder if you could just indicate what your recommendations were, and has there been any progress since you made them from government?
Yes, thank you, Anne, for that. I think this is a very, very important question because we now have a new Prime Minister. Boris Johnson. And just if I take a step back to highlight my involvement and why, I've always been very active for the advancement of women since I've been in banking. So when I was at ABN AMRO, I had membership to Women in Banking and Finance in my induction pack, which was fantastic. When I started, I was one of the founders of City Women, and that's how I was asked to, asked to drive women in banking and finance forward. And so I had been part of the development of the Women's Charter, and although I felt the charter at the time was a fantastic development, it didn't have teeth. It just didn't. It didn't enable us women to see that there were no targets. It wasn't, things weren't measurable. Progress wasn't measurable. So when the opportunity came up to do something of a more robust nature, and there were two projects that were running at the time as the gender pay gap. So there was the gender pay gap reporting, and there was changing the company accounts to reflect gender diversity in companies. A lot of people don't know about the second one, but that is even more powerful because that is a legal requirement that you have to do that. So I had met Nikki Morgan through Michael Gove when I became President of Women in Banking and Finance.
Those government ministers, just in case anybody needs any clarification on the other side of the pond. Yep.
Yes, he's I've forgotten his role now. Is he?
Gove is sort of Brexit now.
He was the campaigners or architects of Brexit. Secretary of State for Education, and he then, I'm not sure where he went after that, but then he was promoted into another post, and I met Nikki Morgan, who's an amazing minister. She's now stepped down, became Minister of Education. Now, Nikki Morgan's quite interesting. She was she's a lawyer, a corporate lawyer by trade, and worked for one of the major Magic Circle firms in the City of London, and very pro-woman. And when Theresa May became Prime Minister, that was it. That was a magic moment. There was her and Christine Greenie, who was, I think, head of equalities. And so the scene was set, and then we had the gender pay gap reporting, and that was produced under the auspices of the Treasury Committee in the UK, which meant it was going to get done. And the minister running with that, or the Secretary of the Treasury, was Harriet Baldwin. And we worked with her and I think Sarah Deeves, who was CEO of Virgin Money at the time, to get the report done. So there were a number of major female organisations like Women in Banking and Finance who contributed to the report. And we were really excited and happy when it was produced, announced, and lots of pressure was put on companies to sign up. And because the government was the architect of the gender pay gap reporting initiative, companies were put on a lot of pressure to sign up. Now, so everything was going very well. Now Boris Johnson is now our new Prime Minister. And I think back in March, there were rumbles about the report not being, that companies didn't have to submit their mandatory reports on gender and pay and so on for this year. And then the government made an announcement that they didn't have to. So some companies just didn't bother. They've just not submitted any detail on gender and pay. Now, how do I feel about that? So the first thing that I would say is that, and I'm going to make it clear here, that I'm actually going to give Boris Johnson the benefit of the doubt on this, because I do understand that he has a huge amount to deal with regards to Brexit. I do understand that, and he has to. I mean, Britain's going to have to be reformed from many sectors. And the reason why I'm also going to give him benefit of the doubt the second time is that we've had COVID, and I suppose if I had to prioritise, if I were in his shoes and I had to prioritise, then it would actually slip down the agenda for me if I'm to give him benefit of the doubt. But what I really would like to see, and I think that behind the scenes, there are a number of groups who've said to him, look, okay, you've taken it off the agenda. We understand that you need to do that because of, one, Brexit, and now the coronavirus. But we need some commitment from you as to when you're going to bring it back. So I think we're just going to have to wait and see what the next steps are with regards to reporting. So I'm hoping that we'll get some statement from him later in the year about what his intentions are.
Thank you very much. Let's hope so.
Yes.
I'd like to take you back to a personal question now. There's so much I could ask, but if you could give an example of something that happened that has notably contributed to your business success. Has there been a point in your career or something that you did which was wider than your career that has actually taught you something and notably contributed to your success?
Yeah, there has actually. When I was at ABN AMRO, actually, before I moved into banking, I know Meg knows this, I'm not sure how many other people know this, but I was in the public sector. So I've had two careers. I was a very successful policy writer. I brought in two pieces of legislation, and I don't make it public, but I entered into the public sector during Margaret Thatcher's governance. And that was a really interesting time. And for those of you who don't know her in terms of what she did in any detail, I think she's remembered for two or three things that they weren't, two or three things that probably one was good and two were less good. The first thing is that she's remembered for making Britain a powerhouse. She actually was brave enough to reform the British economy. Some things great, like, so for example, she was responsible for the deregulation of banking, which meant that we could have the wonderful City of London that we have today, or the finance industry that we have today. The third thing that she's remembered for is taking on the unions, the mining unions, and winning. And the other thing that she's not so well remembered for is also reducing the number of individuals in public sector housing. And that's where I was involved. So I wrote some of the regulations that came in that meant people could no longer stay in council housing or public housing. They either had to buy it or rent. So after I did all of that, you know, when you do something really huge, to go back to an ordinary day job is actually quite difficult. So then I did my MBA, I think it was in 95 or 96. And then I went into banking. And I think in 2005, so on the MBA course, I met some wonderful people, absolutely amazing people. So in 2005, one of them approached me and told me that he'd taken on a job that he couldn't actually do at Citigroup. And he realized that.
How am I know?
That's what I love about men. They know how to wing it. And he had noticed that I was a no-nonsense person whilst doing my MBA. And I don't know if that's true or not, but at the time I had a 5-month-old baby. And so I was brutally efficient with my time. And he thought that was amazing. So I joined him. So off I went to Citigroup in 2005 or 6, not knowing anything about prime brokerage, nothing at all. And the two of us started to build this business. And it was only supposed to be a small business. But for whatever reason, I think sometimes there's a real advantage to not knowing stuff because you ask the right questions, because you have to, because the risks are too big. So you really think and you ask the right questions. So we started to build this business, and he would come in every day and say to me, oh, you know, Janet, look at Deutsche Bank and JP Morgan and UBS, look at their wonderful websites and X, Y, and Z. And I said to him, look, everything is grey, grey, and grey. Why can't we just do something colourful? Why can't we go and talk to the clients and really understand their needs? And he would say to me, you can go off and do that, but as long as you get the work done, I don't really care how you get there. I mean, that was the level of care to customer care. That was actually the huge advantage that I had, because I went off to New York and I managed to negotiate with the head of the capital markets business a bit of a longer runway to get the business up on its feet. And amazingly, our head gave me 3 years. Unheard of. It's unheard of in investment banking, someone giving you money in 3 years to get a business on its feet. Never heard of anything like that. And I thought, well, you know, I've got time. So I went back to London. I did my customer focus group, and I really understood what the customers wanted. I mean, really understood. I took my time. I went to see big customers, medium-sized customers, small customers. And after that, I just, with my team, I got money. I hired a great team of talented people. And I started building what was, if I look back now, was one of the first platforms in tech, a proper platform where you could add other functionality onto it and give the client an end-to-end experience. That platform, which I call Click, City FX Click, went on to revolutionize the whole industry for prime brokerage, both FX and also the other assets as well. It grew so big, we had 20% of the FX market coming through a very small business. My global head of FX would boast that he had the leanest team of people globally, managing the largest flow of business globally. I won an unbelievably large mandate from, I think it was Deutsche Asset Management. They had put out to tender, I think their business was like 800 billion euros a day in FX, and I won something like 47% when they only had agreed to give us 5%. They were so impressed. So after having such a success, it was really hard for me to know where to go from there. But I think people actually would stop me in Canary Wharf and say, you know, I'm sick and tired of your platform. I lost a client today to you. Can't you come and work for us? And I eventually left and went to work for Bank of America. But that business was just, the success was huge. And when I went to Bank of America, it just didn't stop, because I'd walk in and people would say, oh, great, we're really glad that you're here. We don't really want to do any business with Bank of America. We want you to put us in touch with the right people at Citigroup, because we contacted them and they're just ignoring us. So there was, you know, sometimes success can bring other surprises, but I look back on that and it does make me smile. It makes me smile. I'm really glad that I had an incredibly successful moment to change the industry for the good.
It sounds to me, analysing some of that, that it's a mixture of having a very good idea, the personal touch with the clients and understanding what the relationships meant, maybe in a way that others didn't, and having a belief in the idea, so that you got that time and that investment to make it happen. Would that be a fair analysis?
Absolutely, Anne, absolutely. And I think the relationships that I built with the customers, it just didn't stop there. I mean, some of them are personal friends today. Some people say to me, "You made us really wealthy. We wouldn't be where we are today."
Well, that helps, of course.
That's great. I just thought, I mean, it was a win-win situation, win for the bank and win for the customers. It was great.
Yes. My final question before we throw this open to the group: any overall observations? If you had 3 points of advice, short points of advice to give to people, what do you think they might be?
I do think it's important to take some risks. I really do think it's important, because even if you're not successful, I think the learning, even if the success is not how you might imagine it to be, or the outcome is not what you have expected, I do think it's important, because you do learn new skills along the way. So where I've tried things and they haven't quite worked the way I wanted to, what I've learned is that it's given me a different perspective of how to look at opportunities, risk, and so on. So that's one thing I would say. I think that my favourite line is, opportunities don't come gift wrapped. They really don't. And so you need to, whenever anyone says to you, you should do this, or you keep getting repeat messages, because I've had one recently and I've been running away from something, and then I got a call on Friday for one of the most amazing opportunities ever in my life. And the person just stopped me and said, "Janet, I know you're going to say this is not you." And I said, "Absolutely, it is not me." And she said, "I've already told that HR person that you're going to apply." So sometimes, because opportunities don't come gift wrapped and it might not be in your area, don't walk away from them. Think about it very seriously. And the third thing, what would I say? I think that, don't take no for an answer. I mean, as a Black woman, I can tell you there've been times where the door has been pushed, firmly closed in my face, and I've just thought, I'm not taking no for an answer. I have to find another way around this. So don't take no for an answer.
Thank you very much. Those are 3 amazing points which I've written down. But also, I mean, first of all, I defy anybody to quarrel with my description of Janet as entrepreneurial, innovative, and fearless. But also, I think what has come across in your answers is your absolute focus on what it is you want to do and what you believe will work. Whether it's you need to take risks, or whether you need to recognise the opportunity, that focus on making the best of the opportunity that you have, and the confidence that comes with getting success. And now then you put yourself in a better platform to succeed in. And I think what also comes across is your enjoyment of your career and your work, and your engagement with it. Now I have several further questions, but if anybody has any questions that they put through Diane, this is the moment to give people a chance.
Yes, I think everybody's been too enwrapped in your conversation. I know that I have questions. So Anne, why don't you get started? And
okay.
Please feel free to include questions in the chat function. We have a few minutes left, and we don't want to waste.
If anybody wants to just jot down a question, I'll make time for that if possible. But my other question, Janet, was What's been your biggest obstacle or challenge, generally speaking?
Okay. You know, when we discussed this, I really thought about this, and I think my biggest challenge, and I think some of the women on the call will, this probably resonate with them, but whilst I was doing that wonderful and challenging job at Citigroup, building that amazing business, I had 2 young children to look after as a single mother, and I can honestly say that was extremely tough because in the English system we have an educational structure that's very unforgiving. So if your children are going through a process of doing what I call those important exams to get them through to university, you know, you have to be watching them every step of the way, and that really tested me. That was really tough. I mean, my girls are both very successful today. They've gone to one actually finishing up. She did mechanical engineering, the one who I was struggling with while I was doing that job. And she's got a first, and she starts in her new job, first in mechanical engineering. She's just wrapping up her master's, and I'm hoping that she'll get the grade that she's after. She's working very hard for it, but she's managed to secure a job with a great company. And then the younger one, so amazingly, I'd gone to India at this point, but she rang me to tell me that you'll love this, Anne. She said to me, "Mummy, are you sitting down?" When I was in India, and I said, "Yes, I'm sitting down." She said, "I got 2 B's and a C, and these are our grades in the UK." And I said, "So that's wonderful, congratulations." And so she said to me, you say congratulations for anything. She said, "I got 2 A stars and an A." And I said to her, don't wind me up, tell me the truth. And she said, you have got no confidence in me. She's like, "I got 2 A stars and an A." I mean, an A star in the UK is as high as you can go in an exam for.
Yeah, absolutely. There is nothing higher. Yes.
And so I feel a little bit, you know, the hard work paid off, but it was very challenging. I had some dark moments, I have to tell you. But
I can see questions coming through.
I'll just read them. Jen Mylander said that she's fascinated to hear about the Chinese digital currency. How are global financial institutions reacting to this news?
That's a really great question. That's a really great question. You know, what I hear in the forums that I'm in, I hear a lot of people just not really saying too much. People are not really saying this is wonderful and we're going to embrace it. And I suspect that there's more, I wouldn't say apprehension, but there's probably more of a let's wait and see happen mindset now. But when in Hong Kong, they kind of like talked about the whole structure and the currency, everybody was really excited about it. And that's because we could see that it would definitely increase it would accelerate accelerate the pace of change around how we embrace currency and e-commerce, how we live our lives. But I'm not sure at the moment. I have to be honest with you, I'm not sure. I can only imagine that there might be some concerns. But we're now entering a geopolitical, slightly cold war. So I think it's going to be quite interesting. So I don't know, to be honest with you. But initially, everybody was kind of wild about it. This is fantastic, but I'm not sure now. So I hope that, I know it's not an answer, but I hope, if I have any more information, I'm happy to send it off to Meg, to send it to the person who's asked. I'm happy to do that.
We're running out of time. The questions are coming through now, so I'm going to put 2 together. One is, to what extent have your career choices been strategic versus opportunistic or tactical? And I'm going to link that in with another question, which is, you talked about don't take no for an answer, which the questioner thinks is a very powerful mantra. how easy or hard has it been to put into practice, and what advice would you give? So if I
Right.
put those two career questions
Yeah.
together.
Okay. So in terms of being strategic, I am a strategic animal. I am very strategic. However, having said that, there comes a point where sometimes if you recognize your strategy is not working, what you have to ask yourself is that your final destination in your mind, can you get there another way? And when I was in the public sector, I felt that I couldn't get to where I wanted to be. So that's why I left, retrained, and went into banking. And I'm really glad that I've done that, because where I want to get to, it enables me to get to my final destination today much easier, having made that change, than if I had stayed in the public sector. That's one thing. And then, so remind me again about the no. It's not taking no for an answer.
Don't take no for an answer. How hard has it been, or easy, to put this into practice, and what advice would you give for us to follow?
Right. Okay. Well, so let me state the obvious. As a woman of color, a black woman, right? Your experiences for most of you can be very different to mine, but I'll try and kind of give some tips. It's very difficult when you want to do something and the barriers come up. But I'm not a person who gives up easily, so I do think very, very, very carefully about how I get to where I would like to be. And the way I've done that, I think I've built quite an incredible network of friends around the globe. So I pride myself on the fact that I know people in over, I think, 50 countries. And I've really grown those relationships. A lot of them are very, very close relationships. So that's one tip. And I think just on that tip, I think that your network really, really matters. People talk about it being your network. Yes, it probably is. But I think it matters for when you want to try and make that next step move or make a change. You can call upon or seek the advice of individuals who can help you get to where you want to be. And also the second thing is that if you haven't built a network, I would seriously think about building it, because sometimes when that no comes, it might not be apparent to you why you've had pushback. So sometimes I have felt that I've had pushback for a particular reason, but when I've used my networks to go and investigate as to why I didn't get what I wanted, I found the reason to be very, very different. And then being able to go back and present another argument or presentation to get what I want. And sometimes that's worked, and other times it hasn't. So those are the tips that I would give.
Thank you very much. And we are really running out of time. But there's one last question about the lack of women and people of colour on corporate boards.
Yeah, what do I think about that? Yeah, okay, whoever asked that question, that's a fantastic question, because I feel that I'm on a board at the moment. I've been on 2 boards over the last 2 years, consistently, right? And they're not charitable, they're actually company boards. And one of the things that I recognise being on those boards, one of them, the one I was on first, is because the fact that I was the CEO of a division, so I had to be on the board. And the other one, which is the one that I'm involved in now, the healthcare board, the chairman knows me. So he's brought me on because he knows me and he's very comfortable with me. Now, I think that for those of you who are on this call, I think it's very important if you have sisters of colour who are not building their profile so that people know who they are and they feel comfortable with them, that you can help them by introducing them to people in positions of influence who might be on those boards or close to those boards. I think one of the big issues is for women like myself is that we don't have enough people speaking for us to say, oh yeah, I know Janet, she's, you know, you can trust her, she's good, here's her experience. We just don't have enough of that. So that's the key thing, because I think when you're on a board, people need to feel that if they're making very, very important decisions about the company, they want to feel that you will be part of that decision-making process and also the governance. And I hear what people say about CVs, which are definitely important. But at the end of the day, there's a human element about all of us in terms of knowing who we're dealing with. So I think it's important to do a number of things. It's not just enough to get a CV. We need to, the people on boards, corporate boards, they need to reach out and really get to know the candidates really well. And that's why I recommended firms using specialist headhunters. I think they could do a good job in closing the knowledge gap.
And also I think at this point during the Black Lives Matter campaign, this is a very good moment when corporate boards' attention is being gained by this. This must be a moment.
It is a moment, but I think that, so I've had some very interesting conversations with friends who are one removed from corporate boards from some of the major corporations, whether they be Standard & Poor's, S&P or FTSE. And what's really interesting coming back from those conversations is that some of the chairmen and CEOs are saying, well, you know, I've got my leadership team and it's diverse. But when they say diverse, there'll be someone from India or the East, and it's not a African American and it's not a Black Brit or a Black person. But the board already sees, that chairman or the CEO sees the board as being diverse. So also, I think there's something that is lost in translation in terms of saying, look, we don't have the level of representation that we should have. And then also, I think there needs to be more insight for leaders as to the experience of Black individuals in organisations in moving up the corporate ladder, because unless it's just not enough to say I'm going to do blah. There needs to be a number of things that happen at the same time, because I think that if you can appreciate a problem that takes place within the belly of an organisation, then as a leader you can do something about it. And that reminds me that when I was in India, I hardly had any women in my leadership team. So here I am, a Black woman, CEO of a 600 people unit, and no women in my leadership team. So it was interesting for me to make a real effort to understand why was it that I didn't have any women in my leadership team. And so once you understand what those dynamics are, you can adjust the policies to make sure that that if someone's not quite having the same experience, that they can be their best in the workplace. We almost have a responsibility to address that.
Very, very well put.
Yeah.
Janet, thank you so much for giving such generous access to your insights and your experience, and actually such a bracing question and answer session. It's absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much. I will hand back to Diane and Meg to conclude. Thank you.
And always a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. So Janet, Thomas, it is such a thrill and honor to spend time with you, and I'm sure everyone that's joined us on the phone feels the same way as I do. We really feel privileged, so thank you for making time once again to be a part of this community and share your thoughts and ideas and experience with us. It's very meaningful. And Anne, thank you for the wonderful moderating. Because that was just terrific. The conversation was it was so full of amazing ideas that I always like to summarize, and I have like 15 points. So in the interest of time, I'm going to just do it quickly. Instead of the 15 points, I'm going to try and encapsulate it to sort of action oriented. You know, at Quorum, we like action, and Janet is the embodiment of taking action, not only for herself, but also for others. So I'm sure you all heard a lot of that in the story she was telling, and that was very inspiring for me. Your 3 points on take risks, opportunities don't come gift wrapped, so keep your eyes open, and don't take no for an answer were really terrific. So I thought that was worth repeating again. I also felt you touched on some really important points given the time and place we are at in society today. We all have a role to play, I think, in how we advance not only just the conversation, but we advance the change. And, you know, Quorum has always been about how we advance women, but today we need to open it up a little bit broader than just that. How do we advance both women and people of color? It's time, it needs to happen. And we all have a voice, and we need to be using it. You gave some examples around thinking about pipeline management, meaning how are we bringing people up through the chain properly? That's something we talk about. Holding companies accountable for their boards and what that looks like, and how do we put pressure around that or ensure that some of that's done? How do we think about recruiting? And opening our eyes and the approaches to how we do recruiting. Those are all really amazing things that most of us touch on in one way or another. And so really important for us to think about how we're being intentional for women and people of color around those concepts. So thank you for sharing that. And you also touched on one really important thing that I thought was really interesting, which is not only building your own team of advisors and network that's really important for you long term, but also how do we build each other's profiles. I thought that was a fascinating comment that you made, Janet, which is we also can be amazing allies for each other and find opportunities for each other and open doors and create pathways. And that can be an incredibly meaningful notion. So that was my attempt to encapsulate everything that Janet said. I don't know how I did on that one, but anyway, give it my best shot. So those in my mind gave us tons of action that we can all think about in terms of what we're going to commit to as individuals and as part of businesses and as part of a broader community. So I challenge us all to take those up seriously. I just wanted to make a few mentions that we have some really exciting content coming up as well. We have a session on August 4th with Marsha Henderson, and we're so excited about that. She is the former Associate Commissioner for Women's Health at the FDA, and she's just been a really big leading voice around mentoring, career paths, navigating the complicated environments that we all live in and work in. And so we're really excited. And I think Marsha actually joined us for today. So Marsha, we can't wait to speak with you in a couple of weeks. We also have Hope Johnson, who's going to talk to us about trends that she's seeing in the recruiting space. And I think that's a really fascinating thing, ties in a little bit, Janet, some of the subjects Janet brought up, and also things for us to be thinking about whether we're sort of thinking about how we advance our careers within or without or outside of the organizations we're currently in. So I think that's fascinating. And that's going to be on September 17th. And on September 22nd, we have Claude Silver, who's going to speak to us, who is the Chief Heart Officer for VaynerMedia. And she's going to talk about what it means to lead from the heart. And I think that'll be a great conversation for all of us. So really cool stuff coming up. We look forward to having you join us then. Don't forget, if you're not a member, we invite you to become a digital member, since our world today is all about digital. So the only way for us to actually get to connect to each other for now is through Zoom or all of these webinars that everyone's on regularly. I have to tell you, it's such an honor to see all of you share this moment. Janet, we can't thank you enough, and look forward to spending more time with you in the future.
Yeah.
And Anne, thank you too. And I look forward to seeing you all on August 4th on in our next session. Be well in the meantime, stay safe, and let's get the job done on change. How about that? All right. Nice to see you all. Thank you.
Thank you
Be
very
well.
much.
Take
Thank you.
care.
Thanks a lot.